Imagine this. A prominent Dutch lawyer, someone known for, really taking on big names like Bill Gates and even the Dutch state. He's pulled from his bed dramatically with a show of force, that's how our sources put it, Marx Fortune. And this happens just hours before he's due in court for a major case. That's where we start our deep dive today, and it definitely sets a pretty intense tone right away.
It really does. I mean, the sheer drama of an arrest like that, especially then, it immediately makes you ask questions, doesn't it, about the why, the timing.
Absolutely. So today we're diving into the complex and, let's be honest, pretty controversial case of this lawyer, Arno van Kessel. We're basing this on recent reports, discussions, giving us a kind of real-time look at his detention and these ongoing legal fights. Our goal here is to unpack the key moments, the legal stuff, the different viewpoints floating around. We want to help you get the important bits of info and why they matter. It's a story about legal challenges, public interest, and, well, a man caught in a real storm of accusations and counter-arguments.
Yeah, it's more than just a legal case, I think. It's sort of a study in how one person can trigger such a strong reaction from institutions and what that tells us about power dynamics.
Okay, so let's start with Arno, who is Arno van Kessel. He's a Dutch lawyer, and right now he's being held incommunicado in the high-security Voet prison. But he's not just any lawyer. He's built this reputation for, bold legal moves against really powerful people and entities. Bill Gates, the Dutch state itself, and the main legal challenge right now, the one he launched with Peter Stassen, it's called a bodem procedure, a substantive legal proceeding. And their core demand, they want a court ruling that COVID vaccinations are, and this is a direct quote, bioweapons. That's a very intense thing to ask a court.
Very intense.
Yeah.
And a bodem procedure, it's not like a quick hearing. This is the full legal marathon. It needs tons of evidence, witnesses, cross-examinations. It can drag on for years and cost, well, potentially tons of money, especially against the state. So it really feels like a David versus Goliath fight. It tells you Van Kessel wasn't looking for a quick win. He was setting up for a major, drawn-out battle.
Definitely gives that impression. But strategically, what do you think the aim is there? I mean, realistically, winning that kind of case against the state machine sounds incredibly difficult.
Well, exactly. Sometimes in these situations, the process is the point, right? It might be less about getting that final court victory and more about forcing things out of the open, maybe validating a different narrative, using the system itself to, quote, show what has happened.
Ah, I see.
For his supporters, just making the system engage, making it respond, that can feel like a win on its own. Raising awareness, validating what he calls the corona vaccination victims.
And he's done significant things before this. There was that, what some called a Pyrrhic victory last September. He successfully argued Bill Gates could be subjected to a Dutch court's authority in Leeuwarden, essentially forced Gates to come before the fence, as the sources say. That's quite something.
It really is. Setting that kind of precedent is significant.
And he seems to have quite a bit of public support. On July 9th, outside the courthouse in Leeuwarden, sources say there were really many people demonstrating. Apparently, it surprised the authorities.
Yeah, that kind of public showing, especially if it catches officials off guard, it suggests there's a real current of public interest, maybe frustration, that he's tapping into. His fights clearly resonate outside the court.
Okay, let's focus on that July 9th court session then. It sounds like the main event, but sources say it was more of a preliminary step.
That's right. It wasn't the main bioweapons case starting. This day was purely about whether 5 specific expert witnesses should be heard under oath. People like Catherine Fitt, or Ost Fitz, she's sometimes called.
Right, just about the witnesses.
Yeah, but it's a crucial step procedurally. Getting international experts to testify under oath in a Dutch court, that adds layers of complexity, translation, legal arguments. It basically sets the stage for how deep the scientific and medical evidence will go in the main case later on.
So who is actually in the room for this procedural pregame?
Well, Van Kessel was detained, so Peter Stassen stepped up for their side, representing several of the alleged corona vaccination victims.
Okay.
And on the defense, a whole team, like a legion, our sources said, about 8 lawyers, mostly from Pelsrick, they're the big firm that represents the Dutch state. They were defending 17 accused parties, plus the state itself.
17 parties. And who are some of the defendants being challenged here?
Well, the list reads like the usual suspects, as our sources put it. You've got Mark Rutte, Ido Dijkstra, Bill Gates, the Pfizer director, Paul Janssen from the Telegraph newspaper, and Sigrid Kaag, referred to as Diesel Kaag in some reports.
Wow, okay. Quite the lineup.
Definitely. It shows how broad Van Kessel's original lawsuit was aiming. trying to hold a whole spectrum of powerful figures accountable.
So the court's decision on whether these experts get heard under oath, that's still pending.
Expected soon, yes. So like you said, a procedural pregame. But the stakes for the main event are actually pretty high.
Right. Now let's circle back to the elephant in the room, the arrest itself, that image. Arno van Kessel taken from bed with much show of force just hours before court. The timing. Sources are calling it dubious, very coincidental. It just begs the question, why then?
Exactly. The timing of an arrest, especially someone high profile in a contentious legal fight, it almost always makes people look past the legal reason and question the motivation. It naturally sparks skepticism.
And adding to that skepticism, the Public Prosecution Service, the OM, they've apparently been totally silent on the specific accusations against him. His wife reportedly doesn't know any more than what's in the media.
Which is very little.
Yeah, the initial press releases were super vague, linked him to anti-institutional ideas, mentioned possible weapons. He was part of a group of 8 arrested, though some have been released since.
And then things got even murkier.
Right. Claims about a potential attack on a NATO port, retracted later. Media trying to link him to this sovereigns movement. He explicitly distanced himself from that.
Yeah, when you don't have clear charges, you just get this vacuum filled with speculation, which can be really damaging. And a key thing here is Van Kessel's own stance on violence. Sources say he's Christian, has explicitly stated never pick up weapons. His wife backs this up, said she'd know if he had weapons.
So that directly clashes with some of those early fuzzy allegations about weapons and threats. Makes the reason for such a dramatic arrest even less clear.
Mm-hmm.
So legally, what about pretrial detention in the Netherlands? What are the grounds?
Well, generally it's things like flight risk of reoffending, or risk of interfering with the investigation, like destroying evidence. They can last 30 to 90 days initially.
Okay, but how does that square with Van Kessel? Sources describe him as having a clean record, 35 years as a lawyer, a neat man, never advocating violence.
That's the tension, right? His profile, his history doesn't immediately seem to fit the typical reasons for such a strong measure like pretrial detention, especially with that level of force shown. It leaves a lot of questions unanswered.
It really does. And as if that wasn't enough drama, there's this whole other odd story, as the sources call it, his suspension from the bar, the order of lawyers.
Yeah, that's another major layer to this.
Now, it's not totally unheard of. Sources mention 23 lawyers were suspended by June this year alone. But the specific reasons for Van Kessel's suspension, they seem pretty controversial, like a series of strikes against him.
And getting suspended, that effectively takes a lawyer out of the game, especially one involved in high-profile cases challenging institutions. It's a powerful move by the legal establishment itself.
So what were these supposed strikes? First one, summer 2021. He went to a vaccination bus with a cameraman, confronted GGD doctors, reportedly asked if they knew what they were doing, claimed they violated the Nuremberg Code. The bar called it aggressive.
Right, but sources who apparently reviewed the footage said he wasn't aggressive, though his message was, let's say, not nice.
So a dispute over perception there, aggressive advocacy or unprofessional conduct. It's a fine line sometimes.
Definitely, especially in heated topics. Where does sharp criticism cross over? The bar clearly felt it did.
Okay, strike 2. A school visit. He went with a doctor, Make Behrens, apparently invited, to talk about alternative views on vaccination. GGD officials showed up, he left. But then media reports claimed he called people NS beer. That's a really loaded term in the Netherlands, like Nazi collaborator.
Hugely loaded.
But both he and Dr. Behrens denied he said that. So, again, conflicting accounts. And was he there as a lawyer or an activist? That seemed to be part of the issue, too.
That blurry line again, advocate versus activist. It's tricky for lawyers in public debates, and that ambiguity can be used in disciplinary actions.
Then strike 3, alleged eavesdropping equipment. Supposedly used it in court during a case for Artsen voor Waarheid, Doctors for Truth. He was briefly their lawyer and on the board.
Oof.
His wife apparently called that move dumb and naive, using any kind of recording device like that in court.
Yeah, that's serious, right? Oh, absolutely. That's a major breach of court rules, potentially ethics, too. Undermines the whole process. That would definitely attract serious disciplinary attention, regardless of intent.
Right. And then the final one, strike 4, an accusation of poorly representing a Spanish client. But here's the really troubling part, according to sources. This case was fast-tracked while he was in prison, meaning he couldn't properly defend himself.
Wow.
His wife couldn't comment, trying to protect his interests. But the timing is described as very strange. It really looks like it was pushed through when he couldn't fight back.
Yeah, pushing a disciplinary case through when someone's detained and can't mount a defense,
Yeah.
that raises huge questions about fairness and due process within the system itself. It just adds more controversy to everything else.
So we've got this dramatic arrest, these vague initial reasons, followed by the series of controversial incidents leading to suspension from the bar. But now let's get into what some sources are suggesting could be the smoking gun. A new hypothesis and some really conflicting ideas about what might have really triggered that forceful arrest.
Okay, this sounds like where things might take a significant turn,
Yeah.
potentially explaining the authorities' reaction, maybe.
Potentially. So a really critical piece of information has surfaced, according to our sources. An unnamed source provided documents they claim are incriminating. Documents that could offer a plausible reason for that dramatic arrest. The heart of it is this: a document listing 400 names, politicians, high-ranking officials, and they're labeled traitors to the country. But here's the most shocking part.
Okay.
According to this source, the document claims that based on certain Dutch constitutional articles, every Dutch citizen has the right to kill these persons.
Oh, but that is incredibly serious. If a document like that, advocating violence, was genuinely linked to Van Kessel, that would absolutely change the game in terms of how authorities see him. Not just a legal challenger, but potentially someone inciting violence. That could explain a preemptive, forceful arrest.
It's described as a very intense document, and understandably so. The source suggests similarities in the writing style, the language, the legal knowledge point towards Van Kessel, but they admit it's not 100% certain. And look, a really important disclaimer here. We are not accusing Arno van Kessel of anything. We're presenting information that our sources have received and discussed. It's apparently still under investigation. Our job is just to report these different facets impartially.
Absolutely crucial distinction. Presenting information versus validating it, especially with something this explosive. The existence of such a document and the possibility of it being linked has severe implications regardless of the final truth. It shapes how we understand the response.
Right. And how is this document being interpreted? Because even people who've apparently seen it have conflicting views. There's the hypothetical prosecutor's view. If it is linked to Van Kessel, this could be the smoking gun explaining why they saw him as dangerous.
Makes sense from that perspective.
But a journalist who also reportedly got this info sees it differently. They don't see it as a hit list for immediate action. They interpret it more as a call for some kind of future tribunal, where after a legal process, these people might face severe penalties, maybe even death. So a legal path, however extreme, not immediate violence. That's a massive difference.
It really is. It just shows how interpretation is everything with sensitive stuff like this. Hit list versus future tribunal. Those imply totally different levels of immediate threat and would justify very different state actions. It highlights how subjective these threat assessments can be.
And arguing against the idea he'd incite violence, you have his past actions. He openly distributed something called the Blue Book, a big legal indictment about COVID crimes. Sent it publicly to the Ministry of Defense, air bases, the RIVM. Sources say that kind of open public challenging seems totally illogical if he was secretly planning or calling for violence. Why be so public with one thing and secretly violent with another?
That's a strong counter-argument. Consistency matters. Someone using formal channels, public documents, it seems to contradict the idea of covertly pushing for violence. It forces you to ask if the alleged document fits his known behavior.
And there's another potentially huge factor. Sources mention a significant shift in his personal beliefs. Apparently, he had a religious conversion in 2023, influenced by his neighbor, Pete Hollander, and an evangelist, Jap Dieleman. He reportedly came to see the path of violence and radicalization as ridiculous, futile, opted for a biblical way instead.
A religious conversion.
Yeah, and apparently his legal briefs now start with Bible verses about truth. If true, this suggests a major personal change, moving away from any kind of worldly violence that would definitely complicate interpreting any alleged violent document from the past.
A profound personal shift like that, if accurate, adds another critical layer. It asks us to weigh past rhetoric or alleged documents against current beliefs and actions. It offers a different lens for understanding his motives now.
So it's a really complex picture we've painted here of Arno van Kessel. You have the lawyer challenging powerful forces, the dramatic arrests, the controversial suspensions, and now these incredibly serious but heavily disputed allegations swirling around. It's definitely not a simple black and white situation.
Not at all. The number of layers here, the personal, the legal, the institutional reactions, the conflicting stories.
Yeah.
It just shows how hard it is to really grasp these kinds of conflicts playing out in public.
And the importance of the case, I think, goes beyond Van Kessel himself. Whatever you think about the specific claims, the fact that someone is using legal channels to challenge these major institutions, to challenge the status quo, is significant. It forces a discussion.
Yes, regardless of the outcome, a case like this becomes a focal point. It's an example of individual action meeting state power, provoking debate, and testing the limits of legal and ethical lines.
So as you think about everything we've discussed today, this unfolding story, we want to leave you with a question to ponder. In this world we live in, flooded with information, deep divisions, how do you figure out what's true? How do you navigate these conflicting stories? And what role do people with strong convictions, maybe even radical ones, play in challenging things, especially when they face the full power of the state? What stands out most to you in this whole saga?